Yes, I will start.
Sweta and Kaviraj, you will be collating, or Hinaya will be collating the question answers.
Yeah, ma'am, we are on the webinar.
I understand. That's okay.
Sure, we'll do that. Yeah. Sweta, do we get started now?
Yes, let's start.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute honor and privilege for me to welcome Dr. Mrs. Girija Vaidyanathan to today's leadership lecture series. Dr. Vaidyanathan graduated top of her class in the master's program in physics from IIT Madras in 1981. She obtained a PhD in health policy from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Madras, in 2011. Of course, she retired as the Chief Secretary of Tamil Nadu State Government later. And Dr. Vaidyanathan is an IAS officer of the Tamil Nadu cadre who served as the Chief Secretary to the Government of Tamil Nadu from 2016 to 2019. In a long and illustrious career spanning 38 years, Dr. Girija Vaidyanathan has worked in various capacities in the finance department and headed key departments such as nutrition, environment, pollution control, civil supplies, school education, health and family welfare, and land administration. During her career, she has brought about significant changes through systematic and rigorous implementation of programmatic inputs in several domains of public policy. She has also played a key role in strengthening the Tamil Nadu Integrated Nutrition Project, TINP. And as District Collector of Madurai, she started and spearheaded the successful literacy mission, Arivoli Iyakam, in that district. The Department of Health and Family Welfare during her tenure witnessed several initiatives which led to a significant fall in maternal and infant mortality and improved access to the public healthcare system. These are just a glimpse of the impact she has caused across society. She continues to be an active member of national and international academic consortia in the field of health systems research. And she's also deeply connected with IIT Madras ecosystem. As she tells me in a lighter vein sometimes, every time she comes to the IIT campus, it feels like home. And every time she goes back home, it feels like IIT because almost everyone in her family is an alumnus of IIT Madras. Ma'am, it's an honor and a privilege to welcome you today to this session. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
So I think, just to warm up, maybe we will kind of get started with a few questions from our side and get the discussions going. So, the first thing that we all wanted to actually know is that, being a physicist and, what made you actually choose this career path as opposed to maybe going to MIT and doing a PhD in physics and becoming a scientist?
Actually, that's a very interesting question. Many people have asked me that. In a sense, it looks like an abandonment of my original subject. But I should say the career chose itself. This comes from my background that I lived in the US twice as a child and as a youngster. I actually finished high school in the US when my father was working there with the World Bank. And though the high school education in the US was actually life-changing for me, it really allowed me to develop all my interests on one side in liberal arts and literature, on the other side in fundamental maths and science. But it strengthened my resolve that I only have to live and work in India. Now, this is not any grand patriotism that I'm talking of here. This was the 70s and something late 70s, which you can't even imagine. There was the cultural divide between India and the West was really vast. There was no internet, there was no social media. I truly believed that I could serve society better if I lived in a place where I fit in. And that is what brought me back here to do my undergraduation and post-graduation. As you said, I finished it in IIT Madras. At the end of that, I could not visualize many career options, especially my field of specialization then was microwaves. I mean, now you think of it as something to cook your food. I was working on microwave technology, and research in India had not grown in that way, and we were also not really aware of it. And so teaching was my fallback option. I come from a family of teachers for nearly 3 generations. In the meanwhile, I started writing competitive exams because I thought that's one thing to do. And one of them was, of course, the UPSC, and I got to. But on the other hand, I also wrote the MTech Computer Science. It was the second year batch of the MTech Computer Science fledgling department at that time. I did not get to. So I think these two, as a combination, these two helped me to choose the IAS as a career. And there was no looking back from them. My father is also a civil servant, so maybe that had a role to play, though I'm not so sure because the way his career path and mine have been really different. I also have to say that I really didn't know much about the civil service when I got in, except that my father was part of it. This is very different from this generation's youngsters who are really much more knowledgeable. I have met a lot of them in the latter part of my career, and I believe they really got it with their eyes open. I stumbled into it, but in a sense, I'm glad I did.
Awesome. And ma'am, in fact, now that looking back after such a long and successful innings in the civil services, did the civil service actually live up to your expectations, and what are some of the challenges that you faced in leadership roles in the IAS?
Contrary to popular belief, a lot of people think the IAS is very constraining, but my career gave me a lot of freedom to do my job the way I wanted. Of course, most of the time. I mean, I will not go into in this short lecture some of the other issues, but by and large, it gave me freedom to be who I wanted to be. It also gave me freedom to pursue my interests. You all heard that I finished a PhD late in my life. And I think that kind of freedom will not be there in many careers where you're also aspiring for career excellence. I was also lucky to have mentors who were my role models as well as my guides in whatever I did. And similarly, I got postings which sort of shaped my passion. I think all these together, and the fact that, as I said, looking back on 38 years, maybe it always looks rosier when you're done with it. But I think the civil service was a great fit. I think it was a place I was meant to.
Awesome. And
you wanted to know about the challenges. No, I think this challenges is a tough word, and leadership roles is an equally tough word. That's why I changed the title a little. It's life lessons rather than, I'm not even sure what leadership is. Maybe we'll reflect a little on that at the end. What is leadership? What is all? But what I can tell you is there are some generic challenges in the civil service. And I think it's not for me or anyone. It is for anyone entering the civil service. And Mr. G.K. Pillai, who spoke about 3 months back, said the same thing in an earlier lecture. He said in the civil service, leadership or power and decision making is literally thrust on you. You enter in, or whether you're 22, as I was just 22, it was my first job. And even if you're 27 or 28, you're literally thrown into your jobs head first. And most of the time, however much you've been trained, you're never really ready for real life. And the first time, I still remember, I was a sub-collector in Tiruvallur. I was 23 or 24 years old. I was much smaller built at that time and absolutely unaware of how work really proceeds except reading out of manuals. And I faced a law and order issue in a village where two conflicting interests, one wanted the temple chariot to go and the other didn't want the temple chariot to go. When I went into the village riding in my Jeep happily thinking that it would be easily solvable, I saw raw emotion for the first time. I saw conflict for the first time. And I mean, it threw me, literally threw me. And the other thing is you have to think on your feet. And the third is there's no one going to be ready to advise you. This is the truth even as it is today. All these things are common that anyone entering the civil service for a large part of their career is still finding that every situation is new. So that's one. The second is it's a very interesting service because it offers you variety. And one of the reasons I really loved it was the variety it offered. I think Kaviraj read out a list of names, but imagine even I had 18 postings in 38 years and I'm considered lucky. That means I did an average of about 2 years in a posting. And I did about 10 years in health and allied sectors. But 18 postings in 38 years, how much can you learn? Now, you think of it from those of you who are technologists, who are going to be entrepreneurs, you will take your one subject, study it well, get into what you're doing, and organically rise up the leadership path. Here, it's not that. Every 2 years, every 1 year, every 6 months. That's the definition of the job. You change your job, and in spite of that, the day next to the day you join, your crisis on your hands. And how are you going to take that decision? Who are you going to consult? Which is your learning curve has to be fast and swift. Your ability to listen has to be phenomenal, and your ability to take decisions with all this on your head has to be quite high. No, so I think this fact that you do a posting for about a year and a half on an average is something that constrains the civil service, but at the same time liberates the civil service. And I used to say as jokingly that I can always say that I'm new to the job, because by the time I'm old to the job, I've already left. So, but this is another constraint that people in the civil service have to accept as a way of life. And then particularly in these kind of things, when you are going with the flow or you're accepting the popular opinion, these are not difficult. You can actually have a opinion quite fast because everyone's saying the same thing. The real difficulty comes when you are taking a stand which is not the popular opinion. That's what happens most of the time. And if you are a reasoned thinking person, you land up in a job where you suddenly decide that what the rest are saying is wrong because you've considered it and you've found it to be so. And this is the point at which for you to, to convince yourself that your formed, reasoned opinion is worth more than everybody else's, and to build your case, even not only outside, but inside yourself. I think this is one of the other challenges of the civil service. You're also caught in the crosshairs of other people's conflicts. I told you a very simple conflict when I went to a village. Actually, that's a very easy conflict. It did get resolved and everybody was happy. Actually, we did have there was a happy ending to that because I had a very good Tahsildar who advised me and I was able to solve it. But imagine I was a chairman of the Pollution Control Board when the state and central governments were not on, let's say, talking terms with each other. I won't say more than that. And every issue that came up, I was always in the process because environment is an issue which is both dealt by the state government and the central government. And to stand there to negotiate your view negotiate your stand and keep your, without compromising what you think and negotiate yourself out of these tricky situations. I mean, this requires a lecture which probably have to be done in camera with people who want to listen. But that's another tricky situation that it's not your own conflicts. You are always in the middle of something which has already happened. And the last one, which is recent, and it has become, what shall I say, I won't use the word worse, but it's become more and more predominant is the fact that we are tested on the anvil of the courts and the media. This is what Mr. Pillai again spoke about. He actually frankly shared one experience. All of us have gone through this. We always live in fear of committing contempt of court or standing. Luckily, women don't have to wear formal clothes. By the way, sari is considered a formal clothes. Men have to wear a jacket and go. And many of my fellow civil colleagues used to keep a jacket in their car. That is how often they have to appear for contempt in courts. So we are tested on the anvil of courts, and we are also tested on the anvil of the media. Now, these two are very difficult because we cannot defend our position here. As civil servants, we are supposed to be anonymous. We're actually not supposed to be out there talking to the press. And this is been the position I have held over the 40 years that I worked. I felt that this is the correct position. A civil servant is a backroom boy. We have to do our work and be quiet with it. There's no reason to gain recognition. But very often, it's not just media now in terms of print media and visual media. It's social media. I have in the last few years, when unfortunately, I landed up in a very visible position, been called to question in social media, and it itched to answer, it itched to give back. But this is the other role that the civil servants of today face as challenge. They have to do their work and they have to do it well. Some jobs are just more vulnerable than others. As I said, the chief secretary was a very vulnerable post. At one point, a person filed a case that I was trying to murder him. And that too, he didn't file it in the High Court. He filed it in the Supreme Court. Now, it took me 1.5 days and absolute agony to find out who he was, why he was doing it. He was actually a mentally unhinged person. I definitely did not try to murder him. But it took 1.5 days. That's just a very extreme example. Everything doesn't happen like that. But my family was called to question. A lot of things happened. And this is just that today's media and today's connectivity has made it even more difficult for us to maintain our stand in the way, according to me, what we need to do is what the Gita says, Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. That is just saying that do your work and don't worry about anything else. That's unfortunately becomes more and more difficult. And according to me, these 4-5 challenges are the ones which are generic to the civil service, and I have faced them all. And I'm still standing here and talking to you and smiling. So I think that they are not unsurmountable, but they are things that we should consciously go.
I'm sure that in retrospect, all of them look very.
Yeah. This is something which is amazing. No, when you look back, even now about childbirth, there is a proverb. When you have your child, you just made up your mind you're not going to have another baby again because it's so horrible. But 2 years down the line, there you are having another baby because you've forgotten all that and only the rosy parts. So I've had two myself. So this is something similar to that. But the point is that if you're aware of these as challenges, I think you'll face them rather than not be.
I think that's true. In fact, the next question that I have for you is actually a subsection of the same thing itself. We spoke about the generic challenges that you faced as a IS officer. Now, bringing in a little bit of specialization into that, like what are the challenges that you faced as a woman leader in civil services? Because frankly, the top point is
absolutely great question. Luckily,
traveling. How do you manage all of that, right?
That actually I came into the service pretty late. My predecessors came much before me. So and Tamil Nadu's culture, I think we live close enough to Kerala. So I've never really faced much reluctance from my subordinate to accept me as my boss, accept me as their boss. Now that's one of the issues in gender. That a woman boss is not acceptable. But acceptance is one thing, but gaining respect is a totally different story altogether. It is less about gender. It is more about the fact that you're often much younger than them and you don't have experience in the field of their expertise. I'd already mentioned this to you. So you walk into the pollution control board, the environment engineers have been there for 25 years. And here you are with perhaps an old degree in physics, which you have to dust up and you have to go there and lord it over. So this was not so much about gender, but you did need to work really hard to earn respect. And a lot of interpersonal communication. And this again is very difficult because you cannot talk you cannot talk down. And this is something you have to realize. It's one of the life lessons I will be talking about. This is because you have to bring people together if the word leadership is to be used. If you're going to work together as a team in the period that you work somewhere, that is the challenge is not one of women versus men, but it's one of the younger person brought by virtue of an exam vis-a-vis people who are already working there with technical capacity. And the other backdrop of gender, which is also equally important, this is what we call as the glass ceiling, it is definitely there. I mean, I will not say that there's no backdrop of gender. My interaction with politicians, but also in interaction with patriarchal superiors, that is my own colleagues, senior civil servants, both men and women. I think you'll understand what I'm saying. Gender is all over the place. And the glass ceiling has already been broken in the civil service. Women, even in Tamil Nadu, have already held every important position. They've been chief secretaries, they've been home secretaries, they've held everything. So they paved the way, really. I had such excellent predecessors, and many of them have been my mentors also. But that was never a problem. But it was more so that my reputation as a stickler for doing things the right way and the importance I gave to balance the requirements of my family. I was never defensive about this. I felt that I had two roles. One was as a wife and mother, and the other was as a civil servant. And I don't think the first one goes away. So because of both of these, very often, many people did not choose me for plum postings. That they did not choose me all the time, but they did choose me often, which you did see. So there were times at which this reputation combined with the fact that I would definitely, call my family, put my family up front. This was a reason I might have lost a few postings. I also have to tell you that it was, as we said, this roses all the way is not really true. I was overlooked for chief secretary twice, again, not because of gender. I was not empaneled for Government of India secretary, again, not because of gender, but because I did not take up a posting in Government of India at the appropriate time, because of my family perhaps, but also because it was not part of the rules and it was suddenly introduced. But in spite of all this, even without the chief secretaryship, I think that whatever job I was able to do, I was quite happy with it. And whenever people chose me for the job, they chose me in spite of my gender, or they chose me because of my gender. We don't really know. As I said, I did land up in departments besides finance, which is traditionally seen as a hard department. I landed up in health, education, social welfare, but I love them all. So I think I have no regrets, and I don't think gender was a major negative factor.
Interesting. And of course, I think one of the words that we always associate civil service is stress or pressure, right? Like, so you have pressure from various stakeholders, from the media, from the politicians, from the society, everyone, right? And how did you actually face the so-called pressure? Did it actually stand in the way of achieving your goals as a civil servant?
Very interesting again. I mean, I think this is in many people's mind. Why am I, have you really cracked it? Do you know how to face pressure? And normally when you talk about pressure, I think we are talking about politicians, because I think the media and the courts, as they say, they stand on the side and they do bring stress, but they are actually not really standing in it. But as regards politicians, I found one thing, and I found this pretty early on. I found that if you don't have any agenda, and if you're not interested in any specific posting, that is, if you're not angling for power and you don't want to do anything for yourself, the politician actually develops a kind of grudging respect for you. And I think that is the little opportunity you take. And I found the politicians I worked with were fine once we had developed that relationship. If they don't think that you are suitable for them, I will use the word suitable here, they might get you transferred. But if, as again, Mr. Pillai had mentioned this, that if you are ready to go wherever they post you, I don't think that it matters. And you can stand up and let me say with certainty, because I've stood up before people who, I won't mention names, that I've stood up before those who are quite formidable and said my piece. And nothing has happened to me. Of course, transfers have. But other than that, nothing has happened to me. And the other one, as I said, was sometimes it does happen that in spite of all this, you have to take your stand before somebody, and it is a little, you have to call all your courage and grit, because you are opposing in the constitution, the politician is actually your boss. You are an advisor. You may be not your boss, but you're actually advising him, and ultimately he gets to decide what to do. And very often civil servants forget this also. The only touchstone on which you can say something is not doable is if it's wrong. For me, one was if it was legally wrong. The other was if it did not benefit the public. These two, I think this has been said by Gandhi in one of his famous speeches of the touchstone on which we should do our work. That is, does it help the poorest and the most vulnerable? If these two are there, then you can talk very strongly. But if it is a question of which color to paint the houses for the poor, and the politician wants a green house and you would like a yellow house, I don't think it is, I'm just giving a very flippant example here. I don't think it is in our position to go fight. I figured that out also. I also figured out that if they know we are respecting them, because very often we get carried away by our own education. They're often more educated than them. And we think we are more quote unquote culture. But if we don't get carried away with this and realize they have also come up the hard way. They are good at whatever they do. If they are a minister or they are up there sitting there, it's interesting to note that they are good at what they do. And so it's only that you have to see it from their viewpoint. But when you think they're wrong, it's your job and duty to tell them they're wrong and not worry about the consequences. Now, this is the way I define the pressure. And given that, it did affect my goals in some ways. You lost a job, you could not carry through what you had planned. But you went to another job, and perhaps there was a more amenable minister who would agree to have you in the first place, and you actually formed a partnership and could go forward. So I think that's also one of building mutual respect, building an aura of, building a feeling of mutual cooperation, and then seeing it from their point of view and just saying your piece without worry of consequences. I think these have helped me not really. Pressure has again not been, as I said, it didn't bother me that I was overlooked for chief secretary. Two of my juniors did become. When I did become chief secretary, it was for a variety of strange reasons. So both ways, it didn't matter. And I think that's the attitude with which, if you face the civil service, pressure does not become serious.
Amazing, amazing, very insightful. In fact, ma'am, another point is that, the student community in IIT Madras, we also really want many more of them to actually get into civil services. And, we want to actually, get from you some of your perspectives on the leadership, some of your advice for the students today, like both from a civil service career perspective and in general also as they groom themselves to, managers and leaders and all of that in the future. What would be some of your advice to them as a senior?
This Kaviraj is called singing for your supper. When you're called to talk, you're asked to say some things. I'm a little always hesitant of giving large leadership advice because I think you all know more than us. I have now a 15-year-old, 13-year-old grandchild. So she's fast becoming smarter than me. So, but I still think that when that's why I said we will discuss what is leadership, what is administration, and what is leadership, what differentiates being just an administrator and being a leader. I think leadership is I'm not looking at any textbook definition. It is taking a team together, taking an idea forward, causing change. And there's an earlier leadership lecture of mine dating 2010. I think one of my photographs that you put for this lecture is also 12 years old. That comes from that period when I talked about rocking the boat gently. So all this particular causing change, causing positive change, taking your team along with you and moving forward is what I consider the differentiating factors between just being an administrator, that is doing your daily job, and moving forward as a leader. And these are the small things and I think whatever language you use, are very simple. I think listen, and more listen. Listen with empathy. Don't listen for listening's sake. I always used to find that you don't give an appointment to somebody who's important when you don't have time. Don't just listen to them on the periphery. And it is perhaps even more important to listen to somebody who don't agree with. This again, a lesson I learned the hard way. There was a strike which happened in the sugar mill sector where I once handled some 19 sugar mills. Very good at handling industrial sector, as you're aware. But when the union wanted to talk to me, I just did not want to meet them because they were saying everything I didn't want to hear. I didn't want to answer them. Actually did a quiet abdication and went for a meeting in the secretariat. Not very good of me. They actually resulted in a strike. Because of work lost in the sugar mills. I learned this lesson is for everybody who becomes a manager. Listen as much as you can, and if you listen with empathy and listen to those who disagree, it will help you to diffuse ticklish and tense situations. The second was, again, I've mentioned this, I'm just repeating it again. This is establish the facts. Don't take decisions based on emotion. Don't take anyone at face value. These are the real no-nos to leadership, because the minute you've taken a decision, you end up trying to be defensive about it. Again, hard-learned lesson. I once had a subordinate. I was very new. I was sub-collector at that time. He taught me a way to come first in the ranking for collecting what was called levy rice at that time. There was an interesting method at the time that whoever milled rice would give 20% of the rice to the government as levy rice. So as sub-collector, you were supposed to monitor that. One of my subordinates came and whispered in my ear that there is this beautiful way to get much more of this. By that time, I was the last in the list of divisional officers. So I agreed with this method, and suddenly I catapulted to first. My collector noticed I catapulted to first. He knew it was against my grain. I never do well on these rankings and meetings. So he called and asked me what I was doing. I showed it to him, and he immediately figured out that this guy was teaching me something which was illegal. He luckily, because my collector was again one of my mentors, he taught me, he let me off lightly with a warning and a stern piece of advice never to take advice before doing such things. He, of course, the wily Tahsildar was thrown out from that position, and I never came first again in any ranking till very late in my life. So this is one on don't take decisions based on assumptions or emotions, or don't have knee-jerk reactions. Now, along with this is, once you make a mistake, and you will make many of them in whichever career you're on, accept it and move on. Both have happened to me, and they will happen to all of you. I still remember a very positive one, which I like to tell. That is, we went to a place in, I was in the health sector at that time, very proud of myself, doing great. We were reducing infant mortality and all. And we set up what was called neonatal intensive care centers in Tamil. Somehow they just weren't taking up. We were not able to get them, though we were there. We went to Madhya Pradesh, we went to the back of beyond, and we went to a place called Guna. I don't know whether any of you know where is Guna in Madhya Pradesh. It is really the back of beyond. We went on a workshop there, and for the first time I saw an NICU working. I saw an intensive care unit working. And I realized that what I had visualized, what our team had visualized, was completely wrong. But what I was able to do, and that was actually I was very senior by that time, was to accept the mistake, write into Government of India that we want to change our whole plan. Luckily, everyone agreed with me. That's what, there are other civil servants who are there who agreed with what I said, and we were able to change it around. And now Tamil Nadu has a very successful model of NICUs patterned after Guna. And the one thing we learn is this is a positive example. There are many, many more examples where I've realized I've done a wrong thing and the outcomes have not been positive. But once you realize it, don't carry it in your head. Move on, correct it, find a way to correct it and move on. Again, simple, a definite life lesson and a definite lesson in the civil service. If you carry it in your head and it becomes such a burden, if you try not to correct it, it will also never get rectified. So this is something which is related to this decision-making process. The other one I learned, and which was something which was not, it did not seem very important at first, but later, this is to learn how to express yourself. Most of us think that if we give an order or we bark an order, especially if you're sitting in a position of power, it will be carried out. It's not so. It may be carried out, but unless you know how to articulate your position, both to your subordinates, I want to differentiate this, not only to your superiors or your funding agencies or people who are important to you, but also to the people you work with. Unless you know how to articulate what you are, why you are doing what you're doing, I don't think leadership as a skill will develop. And I have a joke in this one. Again, in the pollution control board, I was driving in the back of a Jeep, we were going somewhere. And there was a very complicated circular issued. I thought it was a great circular. I thought it said many important things. One of my best environmental engineers was traveling in the back of the Jeep. In the front of the Jeep, there was a central team. So we gave them the front of the Jeep. So I told him, did you understand the circular? Because I wanted to check up whether he understood it. He said, no, madam. So, a little bit there. I said, why? He said, the language is very difficult. Then he waited a second and then he said, but madam, we never understand when you speak anyway. So one realized that what I thought was very simple language was not going through even to the environmental engineer. So it's something that I feel is very important for all of you in whatever positions you take. Whatever you want to communicate, please learn that art and please do it patiently. And as I said, do it patiently with those who work with you. Similar to this is that stand up for your team, care for your team, know about your team. Again, really important in the civil service. And as important, I think, anywhere else, because the immediate tendency when you face a crisis is wash it off, find a scapegoat, find someone there who is less important and say, oh, he's the one who did it. And this is not something light at all. I'm sure as you people grow up, and those of you who are older in the audience will completely agree with what I'm saying, that very often, instead of taking the heat or the flak for what is going wrong, the tendency is to say this was done by someone else. I think that destroys your team's motivation. You will never be able to get anything from them. I have found that standing up for my team, while it might have hurt me a little in my career path, has been extremely helpful in building trust. I actually came back to the health department 3 times. And it helped that each time I actually built more bridges by making sure that I knew about who was working with me and always stood up for them. And I think this is extremely important. The last one, again, not rocket science, challenge yourself. A job like the civil service, very traditional, very conservative. It's very happy not to take decisions. Keep going the way everyone was going. Super easy. Nobody's going to be troubled with you. Nobody's going to do anything with you. So I think it's important to ask yourself, how can I do this better? This is in every job that you're there. You have to get up every morning and say, okay, God, those of you here, you've got this opportunity to study in a premier institution like IIT. What can I do better in this? And then spend some time in your day, because there's so much of the day that's going to be occupied by routine stuff that is going to go on without your waiting for it to go on. That you take time off to think about it, to explore what improvements we can do, what innovation we can do, and then try to rock the boat gently, as I already said. I love that expression because it means that you have to try to cause change and try to cause positive change. So these are just some of the lessons I've learned. I hope they're of some use to you. And of the group here, I think many of you are going to go on to be technological leaders. I wish you all the best. I'm sure, every day, as he said, I'm complete. I was born in the same month and year as I keep saying that. So you know how old I am exactly, July 1959. And I feel organically connected. And I'm extremely proud of each one of you who goes out there to spread the name of this institution. Those of you who are going out and looking for careers in the civil service, I hope, along with Mr. Pillai's lecture and all our lectures, you've understood the job is not about power and wealth. It's not a glamorous job. It's just a wonderful job if you love impacting society. So probably the best way you can impact society you have to have a great deal of patience, you have to have a great deal of tolerance, and you have to have a great deal of humility. If you possess these three qualities and then work really hard, I feel, as Kaviraj said, you can look back at least and reminisce on, 38 years is not a short time. You can come back, and I'm sure each one of you will find something. I'm sure there are youngsters here who will agree with what I'm saying. If that's what you're going into the civil service for, I really wish you all the best. And I'm always there. This is not a forum for us to speak one-on-one. My email is available with the alumni office. Any one of you who wants to be in touch with me, I'm actually living a wonderful retired life right now. As he says, part-time academic is a very comfortable thing to be. So anyone who wants to be in touch with me, please take my email from the alumni office and be in touch. I'm very happy to share more with you, as well as put you on to some of the younger officers in the service today who will also be able to help you. So I think I'll take, this has been...
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
No, I was saying, before we let you go, ma'am, like there are some questions from
Sure.
the student community. So I'll hand it over to Kimaya, who will be coordinating the Q&A session.
Yeah, sure. Yes, Kimaya.
Good evening, ma'am. So if you're ready, we can get started with the
Sure.
Q&A session.
Definitely.
Okay. So, ma'am, first of all, congratulations for receiving the Distinguished Alumnus Award.
Thank you.
Actually, there's a question regarding this, that were there times where you wanted to quit, and how did you keep yourself going?
Actually, there's never been a time I wanted to quit. It's never been as extreme as that. There have been times when I've been very frustrated, and most of the frustration has come from not being able to move forward. That is, there are two things that can cause a lot of frustration. One is you do something and bring it to a particular level, even you get transferred and somebody else comes in and undoes everything that you've done. That's one of the most frustrating things I've faced. The second is what I told you, being tested in the angle of the media and the courts, and not being able to defend yourself. These have been the two extremely stressful times I've faced. In a job like the chief secretary, I have had a lot of doubts whether I was suitable for the job. Of course, at the end, I did convince myself that, okay, I'm doing my best. So there are some jobs which were a natural fit to what I wanted to do, and some other jobs where every day, as you said, I have to get up in the morning and convince myself some parts of the job were not as appealing. But other than that, actually, I've never had a point. I got posted 3 times to jobs which were considered what they call the A series. I was posted as Director, Art and Culture, and the job had no office and only had a bus. And actually, I got posted to this post right from District Collector. And I had a Chief Secretary who told me, look, I posted you here because you're an expert in art and culture. I'm completely unschooled in art. I don't know any fine art. So this was the excuse he gave me for posting me there. But ultimately, after 6 months, I actually grew to like the job. So, and then I was also in archives, which is the place where the records are maintained. Except for developing an extreme allergy from reading the old files, it also turned out to be a fascinating job because I read a lot of stuff which I wanted. So the bad postings have not really made me all that disillusioned.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. The next question goes, could you share your experience about how you prepared for the civil services, and based on it, some tips for IAS preparation?
I'm really ancient. Actually, I'm going for my reunion next week. I'm traveling for my 41st reunion because we could not hold our 40th reunion. It's been 41 years since I wrote the exam. But what I think what holds is systematic preparation and being aware of I think now current events is given a lot more importance than that is general knowledge. Current events, the statistical side is given more importance than it used to be in our time. The subject itself, I actually did physics and economics for the exam, which was again very strange. Physics was my subject. Economics I'd learned over the previous summer, and I found it a fascinating subject. So I just thought, why not do this for the civil service? So that helped. I gave a very fresh perspective because I was only 1 year old in the subject. So actually I scored much less in physics than I expected and much better in economics than I expected. So pick a subject you like, work on it systematically, and prepare for the current events and the other part, the substantive part of the paper in a very early on. I think most of you are already much more, as I said, aware, but I think systematic preparation helps. I did not go for any coaching, so I'm not a real role model for anything. I went for no coaching at all. And I wrote it in the year that I passed my MSc. That is 1981. I also finished my MSc and wrote this exercise. I think I did everything wrong, but sometimes, serendipity works.
Okay. So the next question goes, like, how do you handle mental pressure when all of your friends are getting placed in good MNCs and you are preparing for UPSC without a clue of you'll be able to crack it or not?
This is absolutely a good question, because I have had my own colleagues' kids who have faced a similar situation. I mean, even if you're very good, that is, cracking the civil service exam is not about your intelligence or about your ability. It's just a combination of luck and hard work and many things, the question paper, the other people who write the same paper as you. So I do agree that to take a year off and prepare for the civil service is an extreme, it requires a lot of faith on your part. But what you have to see is, even if you don't get it, these things, what I have found with people who did this is many of them went on to do other things. They did not go for the corporate life. I know a young person who was the son of a friend of mine. He wrote the civil service exams from IIT Trichy. He wrote the civil service exam 3 times and did not get in. But now he's in Harvard doing an MBA in public administration and in public policy. So he found a way to do public policy without being in the civil service. So there are routes nowadays. As I said, you people are in a different world. It's a much more connected world. There are a lot. He's got a scholarship, so he's not really out of pocket. He spent 5 years working with a research organization which had connections. So what I'm saying is, if you really want to work with public policy, you'll find it. And even if you don't get through and you don't want to work in public policy, then there is something off. But whatever you've learned will still help you in the course of your life. And I think people understand when you say you took a break to write the civil service. You may not get the same jobs that you get in campus placement, but I think you get a different set of jobs which will give you enough satisfaction.
Okay. So the next question goes, like, what do you think the healthcare sector in India would look like in 10 to 15 years? Do you think the role of private sector should increase, or NHS-like facilities should be more focused on?
I think somebody I know has asked this question. It looks like a guided question. I am very positive about India's health sector. I think you all are too young, but if you look back from the time I entered service to now, I think healthcare in India has probably not enough. All of us in the sector want to make it better and better, but we have improved. We have been doing, especially if you take antenatal care, the maternal mortality ratio has come down. I think India was 442 in the 80s. Now we are at 100. So Tamil Nadu is, Kerala is now 40. We are claiming we will reach. I think another 10 years from now, and the other important game changer is technology. Whatever we are doing, we can accelerate the pace of improvement by the use of technology. And that's where I think our Center for Technology and Policy, all of you working in different aspects of technology. For instance, a civil engineering group can do faster ways to put up buildings. The computer science group can look at point of care devices. So a lot of things. I look at a very hopeful scenario where we will be better off than now. But whether we would have reached universal healthcare, that I'm not sure, but I think we will move forward. My generation we still had people with polio. We could not have imagined a world without polio. Or even if you see the response to COVID-19, imperfect as it was, could we have imagined that a vaccine would emerge? Could we have imagined that we would all rise up, even at this level to this? So I do believe we'll be better. On the question of public versus private, I am a firm votary of public sector for primary care. It is an NHS-like model where the public sector provides and is funded for primary care, which means all your basic care for the poor and the rich, poor especially in the rural and urban areas, should be covered by a universal system. As we go up the ladder, secondary care and tertiary care, some form of insurance will come in. Those who are not so well off will go to government-funded insurance, and those of us who are better off, even now, most of us have gone for private insurance. So I do see a model which would be, I would like to see a model which were like Thailand. And those of you who are interested can read about Thailand. Thailand has a universal healthcare model. It's not a rich country in any sense, but they have managed to change in 20 years. They've managed to change the fact that they had a very, very fragmented health system. Now it's working well. So for Tamil Nadu, at least, I would like to see universal healthcare emerge in the next 10 years.
Okay. Thank you so much for your answer,
Sure.
ma'am. So the next question goes, how do you make sure your successor carries forwards your vision?
I already told you that this is the most frustrating part. I would say that 50 to 60, I found one way was that you build your team within the office. Your successor is an IAS officer. Your team is a technical team. So you build a technical team. As I said, you convince them of what you're doing and why you're doing it. You hope that they will be able to carry your successor with you. And you hope your successor will not be narrow-minded enough to say, throw out whatever my predecessor did. If you try to do it all yourself, that's why I'm saying that the leadership model in the civil service is not of an individual. It's always of building a team. That I think is true of any leadership model in any sector, but very much so in the civil service, where your time period in a job is so short. So if I found, for instance, when I went out of health and came back, yes, there were many failure stories where whatever I'd started had to be restarted again if I felt it was worthwhile. But there were some stories where they had continued what I'd done because the technical team there had seen the value of it and kept it going. So I think one of the lessons for all of us, whenever we go into any job and we're trying to cause change, is try to build the consensus for change within the organization, especially if you're not planning to be with that organization for 50 years, which most of us are not. So that's my answer to it. But it does happen. Some successors come and carefully throw out everything. Yes.
Thank you so much for your response, ma'am. So the next question goes like, what are your favorite books, or what books would you recommend for everybody out there to read?
Oh, now I don't read. I'm too busy doing other things. My eyesight is not as great as it used to be. I'm still waiting for my cataract surgery. But other than that, I used to read even the paper on which the peanuts were folded. I'm an inveterate reader. I wore glasses when I was 5. So I'm not a person who reads only non-fiction books. Though I do. I also speed read, and I also cheat and read the end of the book first. So my advice to you is go for it. Read whatever you like. And I think the more you read, even if these books are not high quality books, the more you read, the more you empathize with the world. I feel books, even fiction books, give you an ability to see the world from another person's shoes. And I think that's how books help. Before the advent of TV and in the internet, books will all we had to keep us occupied. And that world, I don't even have names to tell you, but I would say I'm a firm votary of the classics. I'm currently rereading them again. I would say at least read 4 or 5 of Shakespeare's plays in the original. Read them with proper commentary so that you understand what's going on. Read the tragedies rather than the comedies. Read books which somewhere you feel some connection to. That's how I found all of the Indo-American authors. Indian authors now appeal to me because you can actually see it's not so much because that they're better writers, but because the subject is known to you and appeals to you. In non-fiction, I think I've been quite eclectic. Whatever's available. So I don't have firm recommendations of names, but I would say if you have not read Pride and Prejudice, just go read it again. Another one of my favorites. And as I said, because I have grandchildren in the house, I'm rereading some of those. I have an opportunity to read Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, the C.S. Lewis series again. I read all of the Harry Potter books and twice because there's just something so childlike about its innocence. But I also agree that the last 3 or 4 years have not been great for my reading for various reasons. And anyway, this is a good question, and I will go back to. I have a library which I frequent. So I'll go back to my library. I'm a great reader of mystery and mystery fiction. I love mystery fiction. I've read Agatha Christie almost the whole thing, and great fan of Hercule Poirot and Mrs. Marple. I also read the serious mystery writers, because I find Agatha Christie is more for us when we are tired and want to read at the end of the day. I love short stories, starting from Somerset Maugham to the collections of short stories which many writers have written. I find it gives you a quick, it's like a small little bit of ice cream, that small bolts of ice cream. I love doing that. So I mean, you just asked me, there'll just be, I can hardly think of anything that I do like reading. And I think this question has pushed me back into a little bit more reading for the coming days.
Okay. Great to know, ma'am, that you're also a Potterhead and an Agatha Christie fan. So
I don't think anyone, and by the way, Sherlock Holmes, they ran the old sequence here in TV, and I got my grandchildren. So every day afternoon, we used to watch one of them, and actually they got interested, because they normally, of course, they're all Potterheads, but Sherlock Holmes looked a little too old for them. But now I've got them interested, and they can differentiate between the stories, and they know who's watching. So
that's really interesting, ma'am. So the next question goes like, what are the changes you have seen in the last 3 decades in terms of power and influence of an IAS?
We have to fight for our rights a bit more. I'll go this way. I start from the beginning. If you take my father's generation, my father's from the 1953 batch. So that's really early on. Mr. Pillai was midway, he was 1975 batch. Most of my mentors were in the 60s and 70s. Somehow it was not that things have worsened, but it's a calmer service. It was, there was less noise. I mean, and you did not have to fight for respect. The IAS was enough. It was still carrying the residual of the ICS. So a collector walked in, people will stand up. Nobody will dare to question. A secretary walked in, people will bow down. And even the ministers and the secretaries, I've seen the early notings of Rajaji and his assistant secretary. Assistant secretary is like under secretary. Absolute respect for the people they work with. All this particular thing can no longer be taken for granted. The 3 letters behind our name don't guarantee us anything. We have to work for it. We have to, as I told you, we have to earn respect. We have to work hard to win trust. And we have to stand on who we are rather than just the 3 letters behind our name. I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Socially also, people are demanding rights. They can no longer say that, they will no longer come and fall at your feet as a Ejaman. That used to be the old cinema, that people used to come and fall. That's not there. You're no longer my bab. You're no longer master. We are somebody who is there to protect them. They've taken a different role. And therefore, they demand of us. So even in families, I don't know, you're all young people, we used to have a different relationship with our parents. We could not talk back to them at all. My children, of course, a little bit different from that. Of course, my children were ahead of their time in demanding their rights. But my grandchildren, totally different. We have to now treat children also as our equals when we work. So this is a societal change. Everywhere people are asking and demanding rights. And as civil servants, we become truly that, civil servants. We have to be both civil and servants. We are not bosses of anybody. I think that's, and the other things I talk to you is the other pressures that are in media, a lot of noise, as I say, cacophony of noises. So we have to sift out good information from bad information. This was not there earlier. And I think the politicians have also moved with society. So I will just leave it with saying that who we are dealing with, we have changed, they have changed. But in spite of all this, it is possible to positive change. I think the people do respect and admire a good civil servant. And if you have young friends who are in the civil service, you will get this feedback. But I'm not one of those who likes publicity. I don't believe the role of the civil servant is to outpour their influence. I think we should do our work and let it speak for itself.
Yes, certainly. One last question we have for you, ma'am, is what would be one good advice from your side for decision making?
I think the important advice that I gave, and it's not one, it's a combination of things, is that take the decision. I think that's my advice. If there is a decision to be taken, the worst thing you can do is dither. And unfortunately, many of us dither because it's so easy not to take it. And I think if you're any of the audience is in the civil service or is in the management positions, it's not so much possible in the private sector because somebody will push you that the profit motive will push you to take the decision. Somebody will be there. But in the civil service, it's so easy to not take the decision, and you'll probably live a very comfortable life. There will hardly be any stress in your life because nobody is going to pull you up for non-decision. So for me, the important thing is take the decision and then go a little backward to what I said. Take the decision after listening to people, take the decision after considering the options, and take the decision taking your team into confidence and take it confidently. And if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. Mistakes are meant to be made. Better to take a bad decision than to take no decision. That's what I feel from my years in the sessions.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, please go ahead.
I think they're doing wonderfully on time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, that just wraps up all the questions we have from the students.
Excellent questions, really, Girija. Very nice way of asking them.
In fact, thank you, ma'am, and thank you so much. What a fascinating session. I mean, I was just thinking the diverse set of questions ranging from your law and order situation to Agatha Christie to I think qualities, as diverse as the 18 postings that you mentioned. Very enriching session and the infectious enthusiasm and the inspiration that you bring to the IITM community is always, looked upon. It
has been absolutely my pleasure. As I said, I was not as well prepared. I didn't have any quotations to tell you. So it got a little messed up by my personal circumstances over the last 2 days, but I'm really glad I was able to do this.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And on behalf of the IIT Madras community, kindly allow us to express our sincere gratitude to you for your time and for all the insights that you brought to the session. Thank you so much. And we look forward to hosting you in the campus whenever it's possible.
And as I said, my email can be freely shared with anyone who wants to read.
Sure. Shweta can do that. And thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I wish you all a very happy evening for whatever left of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well organized.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.